What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be talking all about the assault gloves in Modern Warfare 3. This is a perk that many people have asked me to cover to see, is it really worth it? Like, how much is it actually helping? And it turns out this may actually be the best option, at least for aggressive players that like to implement jump shotting into their gameplay. So let's start this off with the description for assault gloves. It mentions that while jumping, accuracy and time to aim down sight is improved. And that second part is nice to see, especially because with the launch of Modern Warfare 2, for the first time ever, as far as I'm aware at least, they introduced an aim down sight penalty while jumping. Previously, that penalty didn't exist, so it's nice to see that these cut down on that a little bit. So let's focus on that area first, and we'll just have a look at a comparison. With this, I'm just using the base SVA 545, but I put a high zoom optic on there. And the reason I did that is you can see the moment you are fully aimed down sight, because that's when that hold to focus indicator pops up. That means you are now fully aimed down sight. And while jumping, it can be a little tricky to detect that otherwise. So with this, if we're standing still, our aim down sight time is 300 milliseconds. If we jump shot without assault gloves, this is about 434 milliseconds. So quite a bit slower here. So it takes you roughly 45% longer to aim down sight while jump shotting without assault gloves. And then with assault gloves, our aim down sight time is now 367 milliseconds, which is still slower than just standing still. So it's not like this eliminates that penalty entirely, but it cuts that penalty in half. Now it's only taking about 22.5% longer to aim down sight than if we were just standing still. So that's the first part, pretty straightforward, not really too much else to say about that, aside from the fact that this is obviously going to be helping you, especially if you are aggressively jump shotting around a corner to challenge somebody, which is typically what you're going to use a jump shot for. Now let's get into the other part of this, and this has to do with your accuracy while jumping. And this is quite a bit more subtle, at least while aiming down sight, and it's a bit harder to visualize, but I found a couple methods that should show this off reasonably clearly at least. But before we get into aiming down sight while jumping, the first thing I noticed with this is very obvious, and this is when you jump without aiming down sight, without assault gloves, your hip fire spread is going to increase quite a bit as you're in the air, and then it will shrink back down once you land. Whereas without assault gloves, that doesn't change at all when you jump. You don't get an increase to that hip fire spread. Obviously, it'll still increase as you're firing your gun, but you're starting off from a much tighter spot. So you're going to be much more accurate while hip firing and jump shotting. However, I think most people are trying to get aim down sight while jump shotting, so let's have a look at the tests for that. And the first thing I did is just look at how much my point of aim will deviate while jumping. You can see I'm trying to keep things nice and centered so we can use these lines as sort of a guideline. And without assault gloves, if you pay really close attention, you can see my reticle moves noticeably to the right of center on that line, and it dips pretty low below the horizontal line when I'm landing. Whereas with assault gloves, we're not really seeing much deviation at all horizontally as I'm jumping. There may be a very, very small amount, but it is noticeably less. And while we still do come a little bit below that horizontal line when we land, it's not quite as severe as the previous test. And if we just overlay them, you can see one of those dots is deviating a lot more than the other dot. And that one that's deviating is, of course, the one when I'm not using the assault gloves. And just to take this one step further, I wanted to do a recoil test while spamming the jump button and standing still. And with the first one, we're using my accurate Rival 9 build from my gun guide. And if you look really closely at least, you can see that on the right-hand side where I am using assault gloves, there isn't quite as much horizontal deviation with that recoil plot. It's a very, very subtle change though. So let's do another test with the MCW, and this is using my accuracy build from my gun guide, which on its own has essentially zero horizontal recoil. It kicks almost perfectly straight upwards by itself. However, when jumping without assault gloves, now we can see a more noticeable difference here. We're seeing those recoil plots are noticeably wider now compared to when I am using assault gloves, where there's very, very little horizontal deviation at all. Now with this, is this honestly going to come into play that much while jump shotting? Probably not, because most jump shot situations aren't going to be happening at like extremely long ranges. Sure, you might see it every once in a while, but for the most part, if you're jump shotting enemy players, it's usually to challenge around a corner, and they're typically in close to maybe medium range. In saying that, it definitely does help here, and as a result, if you are somebody that's going to be jump shotting, when you combine the accuracy benefit with a reduction for that jump shot aim down sight speed penalty, this really can add up and make the difference between winning or losing gunfights on a reasonably consistent basis, I would say. So as a result, I actually do consider the assault gloves to be one of the better gloves in this game, because the glove category is a pretty weak tier of perks. And therefore the competition against assault gloves is pretty weak for the most part. And obviously this does come down to your preferences and your playstyle mainly. If you don't jump shot at all, of course, these gloves are going to be pretty much useless for you. However, for players that do implement jump shotting into their gameplay, even now and then, these are probably going to be helping you more than most of the other gloves in the game. Like if you put this side by side with the marksman gloves, unless you're sniping, the marksman gloves aren't really all that beneficial to you. Similarly, if you look at the quick grip gloves, if you're using just an assault rifle or an SMG combined with a pistol, which most people are going to be using most of the time, you aren't even going to notice a difference swapping between weapons with that perk, although you may notice a difference in throwing equipment or deploying certain things. Then compare that with the commando gloves, which just allow you to reload while sprinting. I don't really think that's all that useful, especially with just a regular assault rifle or SMG. And really for me, now that I've done this testing, I think the only gloves that I would ever consider using for normal builds outside of assault gloves would be scavenger. If I really feel like I'm going to be streaking up that game, I may put scavenger on there. But then again, I can always just use a munitions box as my field upgrade, and that will take care of that area for me. So there we go. That's exactly how the assault gloves work, as well as my opinions on this. And this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you guys feeling about the assault gloves in Modern Warfare 3 so far? Do you think these are currently balanced appropriately? Do you think they should do a little bit more? Do you think they should do less? Just let me know all of those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.